And I just want to encourage, I always want to encourage young ladies, is take time. And a question I would give you if I could have sit down and talk to each one of you is, how are you developing the beauty that is inside you? How's the beauty coming out? We're at St. John's, in my first year married to Nance. I was the defensive coordinator for the football program, and they had those parent night things where all the players got introduced with their parents, and then they introduced the coaches. I had been married for 9 months at the time. First time in all the years I coached football, I was going to walk across the field with my wife. Aww. And it's like, whoo, you know, and I'm going to strut a little bit too, you know. And so here they are. And number 86, Ricky. He's the last player. He's number 86. That was the highest number we had. And the announcer says, and ladies and gentlemen, number 86, Ricky and his wife and his mother. And so Ricky walked out with his mother. There was no father. And Ricky walks out with his mother, and it stops. And the next one that they introduced, they said, and ladies and gentlemen, the coaches for St. John's and their spouses. Defensive coordinator, Coach Bob Tissett and his wife, Nancy. We walked across the field, and everybody's looking. Because I had been there already for 11 years at this time. And I'm walking across with Nancy. I could look up in the crowd, and people were saying, he finally found somebody. He thought it never happened. You know? And I walk across, and I get to the end. And on the next Monday, I came to school, and I called Ricky. I was a counselor, and Ricky was in my part of the alphabet. He was in danger of not graduating from high school. And I called Ricky's mom. And I had her on the phone, and we were talking about his grades, and we were talking about classes and football and all these things. And we got all done. And she said to me, she said, Mr. Tissett, can I tell you what Ricky said about you and your wife on Friday? And I thought, I don't know if I want to hear this or not. And I said, sure. And she said, as you walked across with your wife, Ricky looked over at me, and Ricky said, wow, Coach Tissett's wife's a real fox. And I looked and I said, well, your son will never graduate from high school now. But you know what the sad part of it is? That's the sad part. When she said that to me, I went a little bit like, what? Not because, you guys catch this? Not because I don't believe my wife is physically attractive and beautiful. But because I am aware my wife is so much more beautiful on the inside, and he was absolutely clueless. But he was basing his whole thing upon her appearance. And some of the questions that people wrote is that how do you know if it's the right one? If the number one thing that comes to you in your mind when you think about that person is their physical appearance, whoop, red flag. Red flag. If you look at the bookmark I told you about with the 7 signs of a pathetic relationship, 7 signs. The first one is poor or no communication. Somebody asked the question, how do you know it's the right one? I can tell you right now, if you can't communicate, I've watched people in my lifetime. You ever see it? You probably see it here on the campus, and especially the temperature's gone up right now. So it tends to be that the girls dress a little scantier, and the guys tend to strut a little bit more. But they walk down and they're walking through, and on Monday they're in love, and the birds are singing, everything is beautiful, you know, and it's like, oh, and they're just, you know,
like the sound effects.
And by Tuesday, they've been in bed together, they've done their stuff and everything else, and by Tuesday they hate each other's guts, and they don't talk to each other anymore. That's pathetic. Sign of a pathetic relationship is there's poor or no communication. Worked with a young lady one time, 22 years old. She came up to me. I was doing a seminar in Minnesota, and she came to me and she broke down and cried. She said, can I talk to you? And I said, certainly. We sat down and she said, Bob, she said, I got to tell you, 22 years old. I said, yes. And she's beautiful. She's gorgeous. And she says, Bob, I had sex with a guy 28 years old, 24 hours before I came to this thing this weekend. And Bob, I don't even know his name. And I looked at her and I said, that's pathetic. And she said, well, she says, but he said some nice things to me. And then we went into her history of her life and all these kind of things. And she looked at me and she says, Bob, I hate myself. And that's terrible. God desires the best for us. And one of the things I say, because one of the first statements on the sheet that Ben sent me was the idea of, can you say something about the divisiveness of relationships, or what relationships do to us? Community killer if it's not done right. Somebody said, what is the community killer? Do you understand that? What it does to a community of people when you get into pathetic relationships? Because you get your group of friends, right? And you're in love. Oh, it's beautiful, you know, and it's like you got your arms around each other. I went to church to worship service last night. And I almost threw up on the spot. Because 3 rows in front of me was this young guy and his girlfriend. And we're singing praise and worship, and they got their hands up, and then they got their arms around each other. And all of a sudden I look over, and he's got his hand in her back pocket of her jeans. And he's doing, you know, a little, you know. And it's kind of like, oh, praise God from whom all blessings, you know. And it's like, oh, this is sick. For those of you in relationships, I will tell you that relationship in Jesus Christ is the greatest relationship there is. No people in the face of this earth, I don't believe it, no people should have better relationships than a husband and wife both committed to Jesus Christ. Why? Because of all people, we understand the beauty that God has created in a relationship. Did you think about that? As you get there, Adam goes to sleep. Men, what one of Adam's senses were most required in his first job? Sight. He had to see the animals to name them. God takes him and God puts him to sleep. And when he wakes up, what sense immediately kicks in? Sight. And what does he see? He sees Eve. He sees the beauty that God has created for him. He'd been naming all the animals and seeing it, and nothing, no suitable helper for him was found. He goes to sleep. God takes the rib. He wakes up. Do you think he smelled Eve first? He's sitting there and he's going, smells a little different than the hippo. No, the first sense that kicks in is sight. And he now sees the beauty of what God has created. It is awesome. Men, I believe the Bible, when you study that in Genesis 2, I believe that the Bible teaches that men, girls, you got to catch this one. This is worth the whole night. Men are visually stimulated. If you don't believe that, go get the flyers, the Sunday flyers from the paper, if anybody gets papers anymore, with the flyers, and count the number of pages committed to women's fashion and the number of pages committed to men's fashion. It's 2 to 1. You don't believe it's true? Football season, for the last several years, there has been a fashion show that happens around Christmas time. They show it on TV. Anybody know what company it is? Victoria's Secret. Do you know where one of the top places they advertise is? One of their top advertising places. Anybody know? Football game. Football games on TV. Victoria's Secret will advertise around Christmas time. They'll advertise this coming fashion show. Anybody want to take a guess what the viewing audience is, male versus female at football games? It's about conservative, very conservative, is 60-40. Most will go closer to 75-25. All right, you can do it right here. How many men here watch football games? How many men here watch football games? Okay? How many women here watch football games? Okay? We got about 20 some guys' hands and about 5 girls' hands. So it's kind of like, oh, I see what you mean. Why does Victoria's Secret choose to advertise at basically a male-dominated viewing event? I give a clue, you guys. I do not wear Victoria's Secret. Just wanted to let you know that.
I'm out of ideas.
Why do you think? I absolutely love it. I love it when I believe the world proves the truth of God's Word. Adam names the animals, visually stimulating. He lays down, he goes to sleep, he wakes up, he sees Eve. And one of the number one places, a big place that they advertise Victoria's Secret is a male-dominated event. Why? Because they know men are visually stimulated. Duh. You guys, as you go through and you're talking about what do relationships look like, we get so caught up. It's not about, I'm not here to yell at you and say, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. I love to talk about those things with you. But one of the things that Christianity's done is we've just said, don't do, don't do, don't do, don't do. And I believe there are things that we shouldn't be doing. But you guys, I will tell you this, a stupid old man that comes in and says, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And you say, yeah, but you're married, so you already had your fun. And I turn and I look at you. You guys, this is about a God who wants to bless us with the most dynamic, the best relationships that the world could ever know. Nancy and I, on our 25th wedding anniversary, Nancy and I went to San Diego, California to spend a week together. That's a good thing to do together on your 25th anniversary. We went and spent it, and I don't know why, but we went out to eat one night, and the waiter came up to us, and he looked at us, and I don't know if we had something on our face that looked this way or whatever. He walked up and he said to us, he said, are you guys celebrating anything special? And I looked at him and I said, yeah, she's put up with me for 25 years. This is our 25th wedding anniversary. He looked at us and he said, wow, not many people do that anymore. And to me, that's sad. Why? Guys, I didn't get married until I was 32. I remember standing at the front of the church. I remember the doors opening. And I remember, here was Nancy in her wedding dress. And here was some guy holding her hand. Found out later it was her dad. Oh, no. And here came Nancy down the aisle. And over here was one of my buddies I played football with at college. And Gordy leans back, and Gordy says, Tiss, she's beautiful. You guys, and I remember my heart just going, dum, 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 dum. And I remember my mother seated over here, and my mother was praying, oh, please, Lord, just let her say yes, please. And they got to the front. And at that moment, and I say this with complete honesty, I love that woman more today than I did 28 years ago. She is more beautiful to me today than she was 28 years ago. And you say, but come on, Bob, she's 28 years older. You birthed 4 children together. She's got more wrinkles now. You know? And I will simply look at you guys and say, she's more beautiful today than she was 28 years ago. And you say, yeah, but you got bifocals and things now, so you don't. And I'll tell you this, you guys. My dream of my life is if God would give me to be 50 years with that woman. I'd have to get to 82. And my dream is somebody will invite me to speak to a group of young people like this. And I'll be standing up here. And I'll go, hey, and you know what? She is more beautiful today than she was 50 years ago. You know? And then I go in and smack her in the butt with my cane. And people go like, oh, you're stupid. And I say, what's stupid about that? My mother and dad are 86 and 82. They've been married 62 years. My dad is more in love with my mother today than he was when he married her 62 years ago. I watched the two of them laugh together. I have a friend who's 72 now, and 10 years ago, his wife's 70. So 10 years ago, when she is 60, she's diagnosed with breast cancer. You know, if you knew my friend, he loved his wife and he loved her physical body. Who does? She went through a double mastectomy. And I said to him, I says, Wayne, how you doing? And he says, Bob, sometimes the only thing my wife wants me to do is to sit next to her, put my arm around her and hold her and not say anything to her. And when he's sitting next to her and he's holding her and not saying anything to her, what was he saying? I will be here for you through everything. We are in this together. And it's not a matter in my life of your breast or anything else. I love you and we are together in this. And I told that story to secular crowds who are all into the world and who are all into grabbing the women and getting divorced because somebody else is prettier and everything else. And when I tell that story, people get dead quiet. And people come up later and says, you know, who wouldn't want something like that? I have a friend right now who graduated from Michigan State several years ago now. 25 years old. I performed their wedding ceremony. His wife's 26. I performed their wedding ceremony 5 years ago. They have a 1-year-old son. He's been diagnosed with the disease that killed Walter Payton, the running back for the Chicago Bears. He went for his last checkup. He's been feeling really great, doing really well. He went home and they called him and they said, you need to come back. And he got back and he says, your disease has turned into cancer. He's been given 1 year to live. And in May 14th, I stood up and I redid their marriage vows with them because they wanted to make a statement to this world, we're in this together no matter what happens. And people say, how do you know if it's the right one? How do you know? And I look, and how did I know Nancy was the right one? You guys, if you look for a checklist, if everything's perfect, you'll never get the right checklist. Because ultimately, any commitment of a relationship is a step of faith. Now, there are things that you can look at and study and you can know. I just handed Ben and Eunice the pre-marriage counseling stuff, and I gave them a stupid little survey thing that they can take and talk to each other and ask dumb questions. I've had 2 couples in all the pre-marriage counseling I've done who have broken their engagements as a result of that questionnaire. So you guys may want to throw it out and not do it. But what it does is it brings things to light. That are we doing this? People say, how do you know? If your relationship is primarily focused on the physical, red flag, red flag. Do I enjoy my physical relationship with my wife? I absolutely love it. You guys are college students. I don't have enough time. I'm going to run out. When I do this stuff with young people, especially your age, I believe with my whole heart, I believe that nobody in the face